Have you ever noticed how some women walk into a room and everything shifts? Not because they're the loudest, but because they carry something deeper. Meanwhile, other women work tirelessly to be noticed. They perfect their appearance, say all the right things, yet somehow remain invisible. And late at night, they stare at their reflection and wonder, why do I feel so empty when I'm doing everything right? Here's the terrifying truth. You could spend your entire life perfecting that performance and still never feel truly seen. Carl Jung believed most of us are trapped behind masks, so convincing that we've forgotten our own faces. But there comes a moment, usually born from pain, when something inside finally breaks open. And in that breaking, we discover the secret that changes everything. Today, we're exploring 5 inner shifts that could transform you from someone who chases connection into someone who naturally draws it. Let's start. Shift 1. Accepting and embracing your own shadow. There's a secret that almost no one talks about, yet it determines whether a woman becomes truly magnetic or remains forever ordinary. And here's what's terrifying about this secret. Everything you've been taught about attracting people is wrong. You've been told to hide your flaws, suppress your anger, keep your neediness locked away. From childhood, the world has trained you to split yourself in two. Show the acceptable parts, bury everything else. You've become so good at this performance that you've forgotten something crucial. People can sense when you're only showing half of yourself, and it repels them. Carl Jung called this hidden part the shadow, and he knew what most people never learn. What you refuse to face in yourself doesn't disappear. It controls you. It leaks out in passive aggression, in desperate attempts to be liked, in the hollow feeling that follows you everywhere. But here's where everything changes. The woman who finally turns toward her shadow, who looks at her jealousy, her selfishness, her desperation, discovers something miraculous. These aren't her enemies. They're parts of her that have been screaming for acceptance. And the moment she stops running from them, they stop running her life. I once met a woman who told me about her breaking point. She was sitting in her car at 2 a.m. outside her ex's apartment, crying and hoping he'd see her there. In that moment, she finally saw herself clearly. Desperate, manipulative, willing to abandon her dignity. Most people would have buried that memory in shame. Instead, she looked at it and whispered, "This is also me. And she deserves love too." That acceptance changed everything. When she stopped hiding from her neediness, she stopped being controlled by it. When she owned her capacity for manipulation, she could choose honesty instead. And people felt it. They sensed her wholeness and were drawn to it like moths to flame. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The woman who embraces her shadow carries a different energy entirely. She's not performing goodness. She's living it with full awareness of what the alternative looks like. But once a woman stops hiding from herself, something even more profound happens. She realizes she doesn't need others to complete her anymore. And this leads us to a shift that terrifies most people. Shift 2. From seeking validation to self-validation. Here's what nobody tells you about seeking approval from others. It's a trap that gets tighter the harder you try to escape it. Every compliment becomes a drug you need more of. Every criticism becomes a poison that destroys you for days. You become a prisoner to other people's moods, opinions, reactions. And the worst part? People can smell that desperation from miles away. You know the feeling, that sinking sensation when someone doesn't text back immediately. The way your entire day can be ruined by one person's disapproval. The exhausting mental gymnastics of trying to read every micro-expression, wondering, do they like me? Did I say something wrong? It's a living hell disguised as social success. Most people live like emotional weather vanes, spinning wildly with every wind of approval or criticism. Their inner landscape is constantly shifting, always at the mercy of forces outside their control. And here's the brutal truth. This makes them invisible. People instinctively step away from neediness because it feels like a weight they don't want to carry. But the woman who has made the shift to self-validation, she's entirely different. She's like a lighthouse in the storm, steady, grounded, shining from her own source. The winds of other people's opinions may rage around her, but her light never wavers because it comes from within. Watch what happens when she enters a room. She listens more than she speaks because she's not desperately waiting for her turn to impress. She loves from fullness rather than emptiness. She can accept a compliment without inflating, criticism without deflating. Her sense of self remains intact because it's no longer outsourced to the world around her. I know a woman who embodies this transformation. She works in a field where her ideas are constantly overlooked. Years ago, this would have sent her into spirals of self-doubt and frantic efforts to prove herself. But something shifted when she stopped asking the world to validate her worth and started trusting her own judgment instead. Now, when her contributions are ignored, she doesn't shrink or become aggressive. She simply continues doing excellent work. And people have begun to notice, not because she's demanding attention, but because confidence that asks for nothing is magnetic in a way that neediness never can be. Jung believed the greatest privilege in life isn't being applauded. It's becoming who you truly are, even when no one is watching. And once you claim that privilege, something beautiful happens. You naturally crave what most people spend their lives running from. Shift 3. Knowing how to be alone and nurture your inner world. There's a particular kind of magnetism that can't be manufactured. It belongs to the woman who is genuinely comfortable in her own company. She doesn't need constant noise to feel alive, doesn't need endless messages to feel loved. This calm self-sufficiency creates an energy that draws people like moths to flame. Most people today are terrified of silence. The moment they're alone, they reach for their phones, turn on the TV, call a friend, anything to avoid the echo of their own thoughts. They've learned to equate being alone with being lonely. But the woman who has mastered this shift knows the difference. Loneliness is the ache of incompleteness. Aloneness is wholeness, the ability to be complete in your own presence. Jung understood that we cannot truly mature until we learn to sit with the emptiness inside without immediately rushing to fill it. Most of our clingy energy in relationships stems from one fear, the fear of hearing what's echoing in the silence within us. But the woman who has learned to nurture her inner world has made a remarkable discovery. That silence isn't empty at all. It's full of wisdom, creativity, peace, and connection to something deeper than daily drama. I know a woman who discovered this by accident. After a painful divorce, she found herself alone for the first time in 15 years. At first, the silence was deafening. She'd blast music, call friends constantly, pack her schedule. Anything to avoid the hollow feeling. But gradually, exhausted from running, she began to experiment with stillness. She started with just 10 minutes each morning, sitting with her coffee before checking her phone. Then longer walks without podcasts. Eventually, entire evenings spent reading or simply watching the sunset. What she discovered amazed her. The silence wasn't her enemy. It was her sanctuary. In the quiet, she could finally hear her own voice. When she began dating again, something had fundamentally changed. She no longer needed constant texting to feel connected. She didn't panic when plans were canceled. She actually looked forward to evenings alone, and the men she met could sense this shift. They didn't feel pressured to entertain her. Around her, they felt free to be themselves, and this freedom made them want to stay close. This is the paradox. The less she needs others, the more they want to be near her. Her self-sufficiency isn't cold. It's warm and inviting, like a cozy home that others are welcome to enter but don't need to maintain. And when she does engage with others, she brings this richness with her. Her conversations have depth because she spent time in the depths of her own mind. Her love feels abundant because she's learned to love herself first. But finding comfort in solitude is just the beginning. Once a woman stops looking outside herself for completion, she faces an even bigger question. If she's not living to please others, then what is her life actually for? This brings us to perhaps the most courageous shift of all. Shift 4. Living your own individuation journey. Becoming yourself. Carl Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, was the highest calling of human life. Most people never answer this call. Instead, they live lives written by others, their parents, their culture, their society. They wear masks so convincingly that they forget their own faces. But some women reach a breaking point. Maybe it's the morning they wake up in a life that looks perfect on paper but feels like a beautiful prison. Maybe it's the moment they catch their reflection and think, I don't recognize the person staring back at me. This moment is terrifying. It's also sacred, because it's when the journey toward authentic selfhood can finally begin. I met a woman who embodied this transformation. She'd spent 20 years as a successful attorney, climbing every rung society deemed important. But she confided that every morning felt like putting on a costume for a play she never auditioned for. The decision to leave law and become a therapist sent shockwaves through her social circle. Friends questioned her sanity, family worried about her future, but she said something I'll never forget. I finally stopped asking if they approved of my choices and started asking if I did. The path of individuation isn't about rebellion. It's about learning to distinguish between what truly resonates with your soul and what you've simply been told should matter. It's about peeling away the layers of expectation to find the authentic self underneath. This journey requires tremendous courage because it means disappointing people, facing uncertainty, and walking paths where there are no guarantees. The individuated woman might choose creativity over security, authenticity over acceptance, her own rhythm over society's pace. And here's what makes her magnetic. In a world full of copies, she becomes an original. Her energy isn't borrowed or performed. It flows from her authentic core. When she speaks, people listen because her words come from real experience, not rehearsed lines. If you're finding value in this journey we're taking together, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. These deep explorations into Jung's wisdom are what we're all about here. The individuated woman understands that her life is not a dress rehearsal. It's the main event. She stops waiting for permission to be herself and starts living as if her authenticity is a gift to the world. And when someone encounters this rare quality, they don't just admire it. They feel inspired by it. But even the most authentic woman faces one final challenge. How do you live genuinely without trying to control every outcome? This leads us to the final shift. Shift 5. From control to trust and letting go. There's something almost mystical about a woman who has learned to hold life lightly. Not because she doesn't care, but because she trusts something greater than her ability to control every outcome. In a world where everyone is gripping tightly to their plans, their relationships, their image, she moves with the fluid grace of someone who knows that life carries us better than our own frantic paddling ever could. Most of us grow up believing that if we just try hard enough, plan carefully enough, we can make life bend to our will. We learn to read every micro-expression, to strategize every conversation, to grip our relationships so tightly that we squeeze the life out of them. We become exhausted generals in a war against uncertainty. The woman who has learned to let go has discovered something revolutionary. The act of releasing control often brings us closer to what we truly want than all our efforts to control ever could. She's learned that love flows more freely when it's not dammed up by fear, that opportunities appear more easily when we're not frantically chasing them. This doesn't mean she's passive or doesn't care about results. She still sets goals and takes action, but she holds these efforts lightly. like sand cupped in her palm rather than clutched in her fist. She's learned the difference between healthy effort and exhausting force. Picture 2 women in love. The first checks her partner's phone, needs constant reassurance, analyzes every word for hidden meaning. The second loves openly, trusts until given reason not to, allows space for her partner to choose her freely. Which relationship feels more alive? Which woman would you want to be near? I once watched a woman navigate the end of a marriage with grace that amazed everyone. Instead of fighting bitterly over every asset, she simply let the process unfold. She protected what mattered most, her children's well-being and her own dignity, while releasing her grip on everything else. People expected her to be bitter, to break down. Instead, she focused on tending her own inner garden, trusting that if she kept her heart open and her actions aligned with her values, the future would sort itself out. And it did, in ways more beautiful than any outcome she could have controlled. Jung often spoke about the wisdom of yielding to forces larger than ourselves. The woman who embodies this wisdom has learned that some of the best things in life come through doors we didn't even know existed. At times, we never would have chosen. This creates a particular kind of magnetism, the magnetism of someone who isn't desperate. When you're not clinging to outcomes, people feel free around you. They sense that your love isn't conditional on their performance, and this makes them want to give their best freely. The trusting woman has learned to dance with uncertainty instead of fighting it. She makes her plans but holds them lightly. She loves deeply but not desperately. And in this dance, she finds a peace that's magnetic because it's so rare in our anxious world. If you want to begin this shift, try this tonight. Place your hand on your heart and ask, "What am I gripping so tightly that it's draining my joy?" Then breathe deeply and ask, "What would it feel like to hold this more lightly?" As you practice loosening your grip, you'll discover what the trusting woman knows. We are held by something much stronger than our own 2 hands. She still sets goals, makes plans, and takes action, but she holds these efforts lightly, like sand cupped in her palm rather than clutched in her fist. She's learned the difference between healthy effort and exhausting force, between wise planning and anxious control. Picture 2 women in love. The first checks her partner's phone, needs constant reassurance, analyzes every word for hidden meaning, and creates elaborate tests to confirm affection. The second loves openly, trusts until given reason not to, allows space for her partner to choose her freely, and doesn't try to manufacture certainty where life offers mystery. Which relationship feels more alive? Which woman would you want to be near? I once watched a woman navigate the end of a 20-year marriage with a grace that amazed everyone around her. Instead of fighting bitterly over every asset, instead of trying to control the narrative or win others to her side, she simply let the process unfold. She protected what mattered most, her children's well-being and her own dignity, while releasing her grip on everything else. People expected her to be bitter, to break down, to fight for control. Instead, she focused on tending her own inner garden, trusting that if she kept her heart open and her actions aligned with her values, the future would sort itself out. And it did, in ways more beautiful than any outcome she could have controlled into existence. Jung often spoke about the wisdom of yielding to forces larger than ourselves. The woman who embodies this wisdom has learned that some of the best things in life come through doors we didn't even know we were supposed to knock on, at times we never would have chosen in ways we never could have orchestrated. This creates a particular kind of magnetism, the magnetism of someone who isn't desperate. When you're not clinging to outcomes, people feel free around you. They sense that your love, friendship, or presence isn't conditional on their performance, and this makes them want to give their best freely. They know that if they disappoint you, you won't crumble, and if they need to leave, you won't try to trap them. This safety makes them want to stay close. The trusting woman has learned to dance with uncertainty instead of fighting it. She makes her plans but holds them lightly. She loves deeply but not desperately. She works toward her goals but doesn't let them define her worth. And in this dance, she finds a peace that's magnetic because it's so rare in our anxious, controlling world. If you want to begin this shift, try this tonight. Place your hand on your heart and ask, what am I gripping so tightly that it's draining my joy? Write down what comes up. Then breathe deeply and ask, what would it feel like to hold this more lightly? The fear that arises is normal. We grip things because we believe our control is keeping us safe. But as you practice loosening your grip bit by bit, you'll discover what the trusting woman knows. We are held by something much stronger than our own two hands. These 5 shifts, embracing your shadow, validating yourself, befriending solitude, living authentically, and trusting life's flow. They don't transform you into someone else. They reveal who you've always been beneath the masks, the performance, the desperate attempts to be loved by being perfect. The woman who walks this path doesn't become magnetic through techniques or strategies. Her magnetism emerges from the simple act of becoming real. She's no longer performing femininity or success or happiness. She's living them from the inside out. And in a world full of beautiful facades, her authenticity stands out like a candle in the darkness. She doesn't chase anyone because she's not running from herself anymore. She doesn't need to prove her worth because she's already discovered it. She doesn't fear being alone because she's learned to love her own company. She doesn't need to control every outcome because she trusts her ability to handle whatever comes. And this creates ripples everywhere she goes. In her presence, others feel permission to drop their own masks. Her friends find themselves speaking more honestly. Her romantic connections become deeper and more genuine. Even strangers find themselves opening up because she radiates the safety that only comes from someone who has made peace with all parts of herself. Carl Jung spent his life mapping these inner territories because he knew that the journey inward is the only path to genuine outward transformation. The woman who dares to walk this path isn't just changing herself, she's changing the world around her, one authentic interaction at a time. So as you watched this journey unfold, which shift called to you most strongly? Which one feels like your next step on the path to becoming who you really are? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insight might be exactly what another woman needs to hear to begin her own journey toward authentic magnetism. Remember, this isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. And wholeness, true wholeness, is the most magnetic force in the human experience.